Yesterday, the Chargers took on the Raiders in a game that ended up coming down to the wire. And although the Chargers would win this game 24-19, there's still a lot of things that we can take away from this game and use to move forward and what we've learned about this team. And in this video, that's what we're going to be going through. We're going to go through the 6 things we learned about the Chargers versus Raiders game, week 1, going through offense, defense, scheme, and everything that we learned in total. So if you enjoyed this video, please give me a like and subscribe. It truly means the world to me, and I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and I cannot do that without your guys' help. But let's not waste any more of your time, and let's get right into this. The 6 things that we learned about the Chargers in the Chargers versus Raiders game. Now, before we kind of dive into this, I want to cover a couple quick things here, some honorable mentions, some important things to kind of go over. First honorable mention here is J.K. Scott. Now, I didn't want to do a full thing because I just didn't think you could flesh out enough, but J.K. Scott looked incredible. I mean, the hang time was insane. The thing was going so high, it looked like it was going to hit the scoreboard, and he was just landing perfect punts, some inside the 5, some in a perfect spot, so they had the fair catch. And overall, J.K. Scott looked incredible, and for the most part, special teams did as well outside of the Dustin Hopkins missed field goal attempt. Now, another thing here is the injuries. Keenan Allen, we're not quite sure what is going to be transpiring, if he's going to be ready for Thursday's game, but it does seem like J.C. Jackson is going to be full go for Thursday's game against the Chiefs, and that's something very good to look forward to. Now, speaking on J.C. Jackson, as well as the passing defense, point number 1 here is passing defense was playing out of their mind yesterday. Not only did you have the most obvious players like Derwin James playing at an incredible level, but some guys that were very questionable and we didn't really know what was going to be fully capable really took a big step forward. So going step by step through this game, early on we see Derwin James getting an early sack on Carr, coming off the edge and jumping over his tackler, before we see Asante Samuel Jr., a guy that a lot of people had a lot of questions about and didn't really know what his full potential was going to be. And yesterday's game, he really looked kind of like his father. He was getting feisty with Devontae Adams very, very early on, and he was trash-talking throughout the entire game. He was jumping in front of passes, all that. And not only that, but he would end up stealing an interception right out of Bryce Callahan's hands, and right from what would have been the hands of Devontae Adams in an attempt to get a score in the end zone. Now, a little bit before that, we also saw Drew Tranquill stealing the ball right out of the air from an open Darren Waller that likely would have got 30-some yards if he would have caught that. But Drew Tranquill showed some immense athleticism in his ability to turn, move his hips, and jump and grab the ball and immediately be moving upfield, and took it back for another 20 yards, putting the offense in a great position. Now, as mentioned, Asante Samuel chased down and snagged an interception from Callahan, and the very next passing play, we ended up seeing Bryce Callahan get his own interception there as he jumps a pass in front of Renfrow that Derek Carr kind of put in a bad spot and didn't put it quite far enough in front of Renfrow. Bryce Callahan undercuts it, snags it from him, and sadly he trips down because he was in a position to potentially go get a pick 6 after that. Now, with all of that being said, 3 interceptions for the passing defense. They played incredible. They were knocking down passes all over the field. Michael Davis looked good. Asante Samuel, Callahan, Derwin, even Nas Adderley were all looking very, very good. But in total, the secondary, not including the linebackers, because it's kind of hard to count the linebackers in total because of the fact that they're also blitzing sometimes on running downs and all that. But this secondary as a whole had 19 tackles in this game, as well as 2 sacks, one coming from the linebacker, as we all know, and 2 interceptions, one coming from the linebacker, as well as a sack from Derwin James. This secondary on passing downs was looking absolutely insane. Now, staying on the defense side of things, and I guess talking about passing downs once again, we saw the best edge duo in the league perform yesterday. And although long-term they might not end up being the best duo, but at least in week 1, they sure looked like it. Early in the game, we see Khalil Mack looking like he was starving, as he mentioned being hungry earlier on in the press conference, and he gets 2 sacks alone in the first half. Not only that, but there was constant pressure throughout the entirety of the game from both Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, constantly having a hand in Carr's face, getting hits on the quarterback, and although they didn't get a lot of sacks early on, they definitely turned it around. Now, the funny thing here is Bosa would end up getting his first sack of the season on a wide receiver. Now, that might sound a little bit ridiculous, and I know it's kind of funny to think about, but on a trick play, they see a pitch to one player, and then they pitch it back to Davante Adams, and as he comes across the field, we see Derek Carr attempt to double team on Joey Bosa before Joey Bosa would sack Davante Adams for his first sack of the year. Very, very good to see that both of these guys were performing at a high level, but it really doesn't even stop there. Bosa would end up getting his first sack on a quarterback, as well as his first sack fumble of the year on 3rd and 3 with 2 minutes and 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter after Carr was kind of forced out of the pocket by Khalil Mack. Joey Bosa gets his first strip sack on an integral down on 3rd and 3, making him lose 5 yards. And on 4th and 8, with the game on the line in the fourth quarter with just 2 minutes remaining, we would see on the very next play, on 4th and 8, that Khalil Mack would come up with his very own sack fumble and give the ball back to Herbert and the offense to finish this game out. Now, the pairing of both Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack ended up with 8 tackles, 4.5 sacks, 6 tackles for loss, and 2 forced fumbles in a crucial moment of the game. Not only statistically base stats did they look very good, but also advanced stats they look very good. Both Mack and Bosa had the first and second highest defensive rating for the Chargers with 87 and 82.6 respectively, as well as the fact that Chris Rumph, the backup edge player, had the third best defensive rating with a 78.4 for the Chargers. So this duo looked absolutely insane, and I only expect more to come from that. Now, let's let it be known that the Raiders offense definitely is not one of the best in the league, but if they can put that up consistently, even half of that, and just keep the constant pressure, I see this team being in a great position. And I think that this constant pressure was a big factor in the fact that the Chargers secondary would come up with 3 interceptions on their own. And this is something that we all kind of predicted long term before the season even began. Now, the next thing here is going to be Herbert's precision. I mean, this man was playing out of his mind. Justin Herbert early on in the game was 9 of 10, and the only missed completion that he had was actually a wide open drop from Mike Williams. So 9 of 10 extremely early on in the game, and he looked very smooth with his first touchdown being to Xander Horvath, the rookie, and he did that just after an illegal hit on Justin Herbert as he tried to slide down and would get hit near the head, and just 3 plays later, he threw that touchdown to Xander Horvath and made it look extraordinarily easy. Now, later on, we would see him throw a perfect missile of a bomb between 2 defenders in a cover 2 to, let it be known, DeAndre Carter. In cover 2 between the linebacker and the safety, Herbert throws the perfect pass to squeeze it in there for the second touchdown of the game. Now, through the first half alone, Justin Herbert was 17 for 20 with only 3 incompletions, as well as 2 touchdowns in just the first half. Absolutely amazing numbers. Not only that, but he had like 200 some yards already to this point. Now, later on in the game, in the third quarter, I do believe, he would throw a missile back shoulder throw to Gerald Everett as he would kind of wrestle his way as he's falling in and find a way into the end zone, even though he was like 8 or so yards from even being in the end zone when he caught it, and with the DB in a great position to force him out of bounds. But Gerald Everett would find a way into the end zone for Herbert's third touchdown of the game for 18 yards. Now, the thing is, Herbert, after an incredible first half and a very good second half, he would still only end up going 26 for 34 with 8 incompletions and 279 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, I think the reason for that is something that I'm going to talk about here in a little bit, And it's not that Herbert was playing at a lower level through the remainder of the game. I just think he wasn't put in the position that he needed to be put in. Now, speaking about Herbert and the passing game, the next thing I want to talk about here is the depth in the receiving game. Now, something that we talked about a lot in the preseason was the fact that the Chargers had so much talent in the wide receiver room. But not only in the wide receiver room did we see some great plays, but also from the tight ends and the running backs. Early in the game, we saw Keenan Allen going crazy, hauling in 4 receptions for 66 yards as well as a 30, maybe even 40-yard reception. Now, this was the team high in both receptions and yards for the entire game, and he did that in the first half. Now, sadly, Allen would end up going down with injury in the second half, being his left hamstring, and at the time we weren't sure if it was a heat-related cramp or a long-term injury, but after the game, it would be retweeted by, I believe, Adam Scheffner, that Allen would say in a press conference or an interview after the game that there is a possibility of him being ready for the game, and he was then asked, even with a short week, and he would respond with a small possibly. So there is a chance that we do still see Keenan Allen on Thursday night against the Chiefs, which would be a huge addition to keep within this game, because Keenan Allen always seems to do very good against the Chiefs and will only improve this wide receiver core with Keenan Allen out there. But even if so, if he misses Thursday's game, the fact that he's saying a small possibly means that he's likely going to be a go for week 3. Now, after Allen went down, we end up seeing DeAndre Carter enter the game and immediately making an impact with 3 receptions for 64 yards and that incredible catch for a touchdown that Herbert snuck between the cover 2 defense. We also saw Everett and McKitty combine for a total of 78 yards, as well as a touchdown from Gerald Everett from the tight end position. They were looking very, very good, even though there was a couple drops there from Trey McKitty in some situations that there shouldn't have been drops. Mike Williams, funnily enough, wouldn't even haul in his first reception until the 4th quarter, which the Chargers already had 3 touchdowns in. And although Mike dropped the only pass out of Herbert's first 10 attempts early on in the game, the fact is that Mike Williams having his first reception in the 4th quarter in a game that the Chargers were already winning in and had 3 touchdowns and over 200 passing yards just really shows how great of a receiving group as a whole that this Chargers team has. Not only that, but the RB room also brought in 56 yards on 8 receptions and a touchdown from Xander Horvath. 9 different receivers hauled in a catch yesterday. And although receivers does include running backs and tight ends, in this situation it does. 9 different people catching the ball is a really great way of showing how Herbert's able to make anyone able to be used in the offense. And not only that, but the fact is Jalen Guyton didn't even get a reception either, and he's wide receiver 3 or 4 right behind Joshua Palmer. So you could have potentially saw that get to 10 if Herbert wouldn't have thrown that one just a little bit too far on an attempt to get a touchdown to Guyton. Now, after all that being said, Herbert played incredible. The wide receiver group, as well as running backs and tight end, were bringing in some great receptions, but none of this is occurring without an incredible brick wall at the O-line, and that's exactly what we had yesterday. For the past 2 years, the Chargers have gone heavy into making a top-level O-line. After hearing for months that Max Crosby and Chandler Jones would eat up the Chargers, it was really nice to see that the Chargers completely shut all of that down. The O-line didn't allow a single sack through the entire game and only allowed somewhere around 3 or 4 pressures through the whole game. Not only that, but Trey Pipkins, a man who was getting bashed the entire offseason, and although I did expect him to be the starter, I also wasn't 100% sure how great he would do, but when he went against Max Crosby for most of the game, as well as Chandler Jones, he only allowed 1 major pressure and 1 QB hit on 1 play through the entire game, and no sacks. And we're talking Max Crosby, who was just a Pro Bowler, as well as Chandler Jones, who in Week 1 last year had an incredible game, and Trey Pipkins didn't allow a single sack through the whole game. We also saw the rookie in Zion Johnson getting the nod late in the game when the Chargers had to put the game on ice and run the ball. They were running right behind Zion Johnson, which really just shows how great he has been playing this year. Now, the final thing, my final gripe here, and I think probably the only bad thing of this entire game of what we learned is some passive play calling late in the game. Now, early on, the Chargers would end up having in the first half a very good game with 17 points, 200 some receiving yards, 230 some total yards, and the offense looked incredible through the first half. But in the second half, the team definitely didn't look the same. There was a terrible run play that was called on the 2-yard line, in which if Eckler didn't save the safety by getting to the 1-yard line, it would have been really, really bad for the Chargers, putting the Raiders in a situation where they would be within 2, as they would not have to go for 2 later on in the game and miss opportunity. They would be within 2 points and could have potentially went and scored a field goal to win it if they would have got that safety not saved by Eckler. But not only was that a bad play by itself, but in the first half, as mentioned, the Chargers had 234 yards in total offense with 17 points. They would end the game with only 355 total yards and 24 points. In the remaining 2 quarters, the Chargers would only gain an additional 121 total yards, with 73 of those yards coming from the one scoring possession they had in the second half. The Chargers also fell from a 6.9 yards per play all the way down to a 5.7 yards per play in the end of the game after the second half. Not only that, but when the game was on the line in the fourth quarter, the Chargers would go 3 and out 3 different times, which is not good in any way and definitely has something to do with the plays that are being called. Now, although you can say that the offense should be able to make the plays work no matter what the play is called, and the fact that these top level guys couldn't do that may be the fault of the players, the fact is that the calls that were being called were putting the Chargers in a terrible spot in which they could only salvage a couple yards here and there and couldn't get the offense rolling like it was in the first half. And when your offense is looking as great as it did in the first half, the fact that it slowed to a near standstill in the second half just really shows that it's more play calling than the players, because they were still looking very good out there. Now, Joe Lombardi would later admit after the game that he was being, and I quote, a little conservative in the fourth quarter, and that he did regret that and would move forward in week 2 and try to prevent that. But hopefully that does mean that something does occur, because it was very worrisome to look at. The fact that the Raiders brought it within 5 points when the Chargers had 3+ turnover difference. Not something great to look at, but the Chargers did come through with the win. And with all that being said, those are my 6 things that we learned from the Chargers. What are the things that you learned? What most excited you about watching this team? I would have to say it's definitely the defense, because 6 sacks, 3 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles is just absolutely insane, and puts them in at least the top 5 defense. If they were to continue that long term, they would probably be the number 1 defense in the entire league. What do you guys think about this? If you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe. It truly means the world to me. I'm trying to 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year. Cannot do that without your guys' help. And as always, I hope it taught you something today. Hope it made you smile. Hope it made you laugh. Something's really important to me. Affects someone else today in a great way, because every single day can be a great day if we all just put in the effort. And as always, you guys all be safe out there. But something deep